There is a voice inside you that has been speaking long before you became aware of it. It whispers, repeats, and shapes your reality in silence. You have trusted it without ever examining its origin. Now, something begins to feel different. You are starting to listen, not to obey, but to understand. There is a voice inside you, and it has been there longer than you remember. It speaks in quiet moments. It fills the space between your thoughts. It narrates your reactions before you even realize you are reacting. And the strangest part is, you have never truly questioned it. You have listened. You have obeyed. You have allowed it to define what is possible, what is safe, what is you. But now, something feels different. There is a subtle shift happening within you. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a gentle awareness, like waking up inside your own mind. You begin to notice the tone of that voice. The way it repeats certain ideas. The way it leans toward doubt, or fear, or hesitation. And for the first time, you are not just hearing it. You are observing it. This voice did not begin with you. It was formed, piece by piece, through moments you lived and then forgot. Through words you heard as a child. Through reactions you absorbed from others. Through experiences that left impressions deeper than memory. Each moment added a line of code. Each emotion reinforced a pattern. Each repetition strengthened a belief. Until one day, the voice became automatic. And you began to mistake it for your own. You feel it when you hesitate before taking action. A quiet whisper, what if this goes wrong? You feel it when you doubt yourself without reason. A subtle echo, you're not ready yet. You feel it when you hold back, even when something inside you wants to move forward. It feels natural. Familiar. Almost protective. But look closer. Is it guiding you, or limiting you? There is a part of you that wants more. More clarity. More control. More peace within your own mind. But every time that desire begins to rise, the voice responds. Not with support, but with resistance. It reminds you of past failures. It magnifies uncertainty. It keeps you within the boundaries of what feels known. And slowly, almost invisibly, it shapes your decisions. Not through force, but through suggestion. This is the hidden struggle. Not between you and the world, but between you and the voice you never chose. A voice that speaks in your language. That uses your memories. That feels like you, but is not truly you. And the conflict it creates is subtle. You want to move forward, but something pulls you back. You want to believe, but doubt quietly interrupts. You want to feel calm, but tension appears without warning. It feels like you are divided. But in truth, you are becoming aware. Awareness is the beginning of everything. Because the moment you notice the voice, it loses its invisibility. And what is no longer invisible, can no longer control you in the same way. So you begin to listen differently. Not as a follower, but as an observer. You notice how certain thoughts repeat at specific times. How certain fears arise in familiar situations. How certain beliefs seem to run on a loop, without your permission. It becomes clear. This voice is not spontaneous. It is programmed. Your mind operates like a system. And within this system, beliefs act as instructions. They tell your brain how to interpret reality. They tell your body how to respond. They tell your emotions what to feel. And the voice is simply the expression of those instructions. It reads the code and speaks it back to you. Over and over and over again. Until repetition becomes identity. But here is something most people never realize. Just because a thought appears does not mean it is true. Just because a voice speaks does not mean it is right. And just because something feels familiar does not mean it is meant to stay. There is a space within you, deeper than the voice. A quiet place where observation exists without judgment. You begin to sense it now. It is the part of you that notices your thoughts. The part that questions gently. The part that does not react immediately, but waits. This is where your power begins. Not in controlling every thought, but in choosing which thoughts you allow to stay. So you begin a new practice. Not forcing change. Not fighting the voice. But watching it. When it speaks, you listen. Not to obey, but to understand. You notice its patterns. Its favorite fears. Its repeated phrases. And something interesting happens. The more you observe, the less automatic it becomes. The more you notice, the more space you create. And in that space, something new begins to emerge. A different kind of voice. Softer. Calmer. Less reactive. It does not rush. It does not push fear. It does not repeat old stories. It simply offers a choice. At first, it feels unfamiliar. Because you are not used to hearing it. You are used to urgency. To doubt. To mental noise. But this new voice is different. It speaks with clarity, not pressure. With presence, not panic. And slowly, you begin to recognize it. Not as something new, but as something that has always been there, beneath the noise. This is the beginning of your shift. Not by silencing the old voice, but by no longer giving it automatic authority. You start to question gently. Is this thought helping me, or limiting me? Is this belief something I chose, or something I inherited? Is this voice guiding me, or keeping me the same? These questions do not create conflict. They create awareness. And awareness begins to dissolve what once felt permanent. Now, you start to respond differently. When doubt appears, you pause. When fear speaks, you listen without reacting. When limitation whispers, you observe without accepting. And each time you do this, you weaken the old pattern. Not through force, but through presence. This is how reprogramming begins. Not with loud affirmations. Not with forced positivity. But with quiet recognition. You see the code. And you stop running it automatically. You create space. And you allow new possibilities to enter. You begin to realize. You are not the voice. You are the one who hears it. And that realization changes everything. Because if you are the observer, then you are also the one who can choose. Choose what to believe. Choose what to repeat. Choose what becomes your truth. Not instantly. Not perfectly. But gradually, intentionally, consistently. You are not trying to become someone new. You are uncovering who you are without the noise. Without the borrowed beliefs. Without the automatic limitations. You begin to feel lighter. Not because life has changed, but because your relationship with your mind is changing. And as this shift deepens, you notice something subtle within your body. A slight release of tension. A moment of calm where there was once resistance. A breath that feels more natural, more complete. It is small. But it is real. Because your body has always been listening to that voice. And now, the voice is beginning to change. You are not rushing this process. You are allowing it. One observation at a time. One pause at a time. One conscious moment at a time. And with each moment, you move further away from unconscious repetition. And closer to conscious creation. Your thoughts are not random, they are rehearsed patterns. Installed quietly through moments you barely remember. Every reaction, every fear, every belief follows a script. But scripts can be rewritten. If you are willing to see what has been running you. Your thoughts feel immediate, but they are not new. They arrive quickly. so quickly that you assume they belong to the present moment. That they are responses to what is happening right now. But if you slow down, just slightly, you begin to notice something unusual. You have thought this before. Not once. Not twice. But many times. The same doubt. The same hesitation. The same quiet expectation of what will happen next. It feels like thinking. But it is repetition. There is a pattern beneath every thought you believe is spontaneous. A structure. A sequence. A silent script that has been playing long before this moment. And you have been following it, without realizing it exists. Think about the way you react to uncertainty. Before anything actually goes wrong, your mind begins to predict. What if this fails? What if I'm not enough? What if something goes wrong again? These are not new ideas. They are familiar lines. Rehearsed so many times that they feel like truth. This is the hidden mechanism of your mind. It does not create from nothing. It selects from what already exists. From stored memories. From emotional imprints. From repeated interpretations of past experiences. And then, it presents them as now. This is why certain situations feel predictable, even when they are not. Because your mind is not reacting to reality. It is reacting to its own stored version of reality. A version built over time. Layer by layer. Thought by thought. You were not born with these patterns. They were installed. Quietly. Gradually. Without your permission. A moment when you were told you were not ready. A time when something did not go the way you expected. A feeling of rejection, embarrassment, or uncertainty. Each moment left a trace. Not just in memory, but in interpretation. Your mind asked a question in those moments. What does this mean about me? And whatever answer it created, it kept. That answer became a belief. That belief became a filter. And that filter began shaping every thought that followed. So when something new happens, your mind does not see it clearly. It compares it. It searches its internal system, looking for a familiar match. And when it finds one, it repeats the same response. This is why you sometimes feel stuck. Not because life is repeating itself, but because your internal script is. You want to change. You want to think differently. You want to feel more in control. But every time you try, something pulls you back into the same patterns. The same reactions. The same emotional cycles. It feels like resistance. But it is actually programming. Your mind is doing exactly what it has been trained to do. To repeat what feels known. To protect what feels familiar. To avoid what once felt painful. Even if that protection is now limitation. And this is where your awareness deepens. Because now, you are not just hearing the voice. You are starting to see the system behind it. You begin to notice how certain thoughts appear in clusters. How one doubt leads to another. How one fear triggers a chain of similar ideas. It is not random. It is structured. Like a sequence of commands. Running automatically. If one belief is activated, others follow. I might fail becomes I'm not ready. Which becomes I should wait. Which becomes inaction. All within seconds. All without conscious choice. This is the script. Not written on paper, but written into your subconscious. And here is the most important realization. If it was written, it can be rewritten. But rewriting does not begin with force. It begins with seeing. Clearly. Calmly. Without judgment. You do not fight the script. You study it. You observe when it starts. What triggers it? How it unfolds. You watch the sequence. Thought by thought. Reaction by reaction. And as you watch, you begin to notice something subtle. There is always a starting point. A first thought. A quiet assumption that begins the chain. It might be small. Almost invisible. A slight doubt. A quick interpretation. A feeling that passes quickly but leaves a mark. This is where the pattern begins. And this is where your power exists. Because if you can see the first thought, you can pause before the rest follow. At first, this pause feels unfamiliar. Your mind is used to speed. To immediate reaction. To automatic continuation. But now, you are introducing space. And in that space, something changes. Instead of continuing the old sequence, you begin to question it. Is this thought true? Is this the only way to see this? Is this coming from the present or the past? These questions do not stop the mind. They redirect it. You are not trying to eliminate thinking. You are learning to guide it. This is the beginning of reprogramming. Not by replacing everything at once, but by interrupting the automatic flow. And when the flow is interrupted, you gain access to choice. Now, instead of continuing the old script, you can introduce a new line. A different interpretation. A new possibility. At first, it feels uncertain. Because the new thought is not yet familiar. It does not have repetition behind it. It does not feel automatic. But this is how all patterns begin. With a single repetition. So you begin gently. When the old thought says, "This will not work," you respond with, "There is another way to see this." When the old belief says, "I am not ready," you introduce, "I am learning as I move forward." You are not forcing belief. You are planting it. And with repetition, it begins to take root. Your mind starts to recognize the new pattern. Slowly. Subtly. It does not replace the old one immediately. But it begins to exist alongside it. And each time you choose the new thought, you strengthen it. Each time you pause instead of reacting, you weaken the old script. This is not instant change. This is gradual transformation. And something begins to shift within you. You feel less controlled by your reactions. Less defined by your automatic thoughts. There is space now. A sense of distance between you and the patterns. You are no longer inside the script. You are observing it and rewriting it. And as this awareness deepens, you begin to notice something even more profound. Your thoughts are not just patterns of the mind. They are connected to something deeper. Something that influences not just how you think, but how you feel, how you respond, how your body reacts. Because every repeated thought carries an emotional tone. Every belief carries a sensation. And over time, these patterns do not just stay in your mind. They move into your body. Tension begins where worry repeats. Fatigue follows constant mental strain. Discomfort grows where fear becomes familiar. Your body has been learning your thoughts. Responding to them. Adapting to them. And now, as you begin to change the script, something else begins to change as well. Not immediately. Not dramatically. But subtly. A slight ease in your breathing. A moment of calm where tension once appeared. A feeling of lightness, even if only for a second. This is your system responding. To new instructions. To new patterns. To a new way of thinking. You are not just changing your thoughts. You are changing the entire internal environment. And as you continue to observe, to pause, to choose, you begin to realize the patterns that once felt permanent were only repeated. And what is repeated can always be changed. What you repeatedly think begins to echo in your body. Stress is not just felt, it is created from within. Your inner dialogue becomes tension, fatigue, imbalance. Your body is listening, always listening. And it is responding to every word you say inside. Your body is not separate from your thoughts. It never has been. Every thought you repeat. Every belief you hold. Every silent sentence you whisper within. Your body hears it. Not as language, but as instruction. And over time, those instructions become sensations. You may not notice it at first. Because it happens slowly. Quietly. Beneath your awareness. But if you pause, just for a moment, and bring your attention inward, you begin to feel it. A tightness in your chest that appears without warning. A heaviness in your shoulders that never fully leaves. A subtle fatigue that lingers, even when you have rested. It feels physical. But its origin is deeper. Your body is responding to your internal dialogue. To the patterns you have been repeating. To the emotions you have been holding. To the meanings you have been assigning to your experiences. When your mind says, something is wrong, your body prepares. When your thoughts repeat uncertainty, your system stays alert. When your inner voice leans toward fear, your body does not question it. It reacts. This is how stress is created. Not only by what happens outside of you, but by what you continue to say within. Think about the moments when nothing is actually happening. And yet, your body feels tense. There is no immediate danger. No urgent problem. But your breathing becomes shallow. Your muscles tighten slightly. Your mind continues to search for something to solve. This is not random. It is the echo of your thoughts. Your subconscious mind does not distinguish between imagination and reality. It responds to repetition. So when a thought is repeated often enough, your body treats it as truth. If you repeatedly think, I am under pressure, your body begins to live in pressure. If your inner dialogue says, I am overwhelmed, your system begins to feel overwhelmed. Even in moments of stillness. This is how thoughts become biology. Through repetition. Through emotional reinforcement. Through unconscious acceptance. And this is where the struggle deepens. Because you are not only thinking these patterns, you are feeling them. You wake up with a sense of weight, without knowing why. You carry tension through your day, without noticing when it began. You feel drained, even when nothing physically demanding has occurred. It feels like something is happening to you. But in truth, something is happening through you. Your inner dialogue has been shaping your internal state. Not in one moment, but over time. And because it has been gradual, it has felt normal. This is why change feels difficult. Because you are not only changing thoughts, you are changing what your body has adapted to. But now, something is different. You are becoming aware. You begin to notice the connection. A thought appears. And your body reacts. A belief repeats. And a sensation follows. You start to see the pattern. Clearly. Calmly. Without judgment. And in that awareness, you realize something powerful. Your body is not working against you. It is responding to you. Every sensation is feedback. Every feeling is a signal. Every tension is a message. Not a problem to fight, but a response to understand. So instead of resisting what you feel, you begin to listen. When tension appears, you pause. Not to escape it, but to observe it. You ask gently, what thought is connected to this feeling? At first, the answer may not be clear. But with patience, you begin to notice a subtle worry that passed quickly. A quiet assumption you did not question. A familiar pattern that felt automatic. You begin to trace the feeling back to the thought. And as you do, the connection becomes undeniable. This is your awareness expanding. Not just in the mind, but in the body. Now, reprogramming takes on a deeper meaning. You are not only changing what you think, you are influencing how you feel. So you begin to introduce new instructions. Gently. Consistently. When your mind starts to create pressure, you respond with calm. There is no urgency in this moment. When your thoughts lean toward overwhelm, you shift your focus. I can take this one step at a time. You are not denying reality. You are choosing how to interpret it. And with each new thought, your body receives a different signal. Not instantly. Not dramatically. But gradually. Your breathing becomes deeper. Your muscles begin to soften. Your internal state shifts, even if only slightly. These small changes matter, because they are signals of a new pattern forming. Your body is learning something new. That it does not need to remain in constant alert. That it can return to balance. That it can trust the messages it receives. And this trust begins with you. You start to notice when your system becomes tense. And instead of reacting, you guide it. You slow your breathing. You relax your posture. You bring your attention back to the present moment. Not as a technique, but as a response. You are teaching your body a new rhythm. One that is not driven by fear, but by awareness. And as this rhythm becomes familiar, something begins to shift within your identity. You are no longer someone who is constantly reacting. You are someone who is aware, who listens, who responds with intention. This is the beginning of internal control. Not by force, but by understanding. Your mind and body are no longer disconnected. They are communicating. And you are becoming fluent in that communication. You notice how certain thoughts create tension, and how different thoughts create ease. You begin to choose thoughts, not only for how they sound, but for how they feel. Because now you understand. Every thought is a signal. Every belief is a command. Every repeated idea shapes your internal state. And with this understanding, you become more intentional. You no longer allow every thought to pass unchecked. You listen. You observe. You choose. And slowly, your body begins to reflect that choice. Not in a sudden transformation, but in subtle shifts. A moment of calm where there used to be tension. A sense of ease where there was once pressure. A feeling of lightness that begins to appear more often. These are signs. Not of perfection, but of change. Your system is responding to new patterns, to new interpretations, to a new way of being. And as you continue this process, you realize something even deeper. Your body has been holding the past, not as memory, but as sensation. Every repeated thought, every reinforced belief, has left an imprint. And now, as you change the dialogue, those imprints begin to shift. Gently. Gradually. You are not forcing healing. You are allowing it. By changing the way you think, you are changing the way your body exists. And this connection, once invisible, is now becoming clear. There is a quiet war within you, between your deeper truth and your conditioned identity. You feel it in hesitation, in doubt, in resistance. Two versions of you are trying to exist at once. And only one can take control. There is a tension within you that is difficult to explain. Not loud. Not obvious. But always present, in subtle ways. It appears when you are about to move forward, and something holds you back. When you feel a quiet pull toward growth, and an equally strong resistance. When part of you knows what you want, and another part questions if you deserve it. This is not confusion. This is conflict. Two versions of you are trying to exist at the same time. One is familiar. It is built from your past. From repeated thoughts. From beliefs you have carried for years. It knows your limits. It reminds you of your fears. It keeps you within what feels safe, even if that safety feels restrictive. The other version is quieter. Less defined. But deeply present. It does not shout. It does not argue. It simply knows. It knows there is more available to you. More clarity. More control. More peace. It does not come from fear. It comes from something deeper. But because it is unfamiliar, you do not always trust it. So when these two versions meet, a quiet struggle begins. You feel it when you hesitate. You want to take action. But something tells you to wait. You want to speak. But doubt interrupts. You want to change. But a familiar voice reminds you of who you have always been. And in these moments, the conditioned identity often takes control. Not because it is stronger, but because it is practiced. It has been repeated more times. Reinforced more consistently. Accepted without question. So it feels real. This is how identity is formed. Not by truth, but by repetition. Every time you think, this is just how I am, you strengthen the pattern. Every time you act from old beliefs, you reinforce the identity. And over time, it becomes automatic. But now, something is shifting. You are beginning to notice the difference between what feels familiar and what feels true. Familiar is comfortable. It requires no effort, no awareness. It runs on its own. But truth feels different. It requires presence. It asks for attention. It invites you to pause and choose. And this is where the conflict becomes visible. You start to question the identity you have been living. Not with force, but with curiosity. Is this who I am, or who I have been conditioned to be? This question does not create immediate answers. But it creates space. And in that space, the deeper version of you begins to emerge more clearly. You start to notice moments when you feel aligned. When your thoughts are calm. When your actions feel intentional. When your responses come from clarity, not habit. These moments may be brief, but they are significant. Because they reveal something important. You are not limited to one version of yourself. The identity you have been living is not fixed. It is flexible. It can change. But change does not happen by rejecting the old identity. It happens by understanding it. You begin to observe the patterns that define it. The thoughts it repeats. The fears it relies on. The assumptions it makes. You see how it reacts to uncertainty. How it avoids discomfort. How it seeks familiarity. And as you observe, you begin to separate from it. Not completely, but gradually. You no longer say, this is who I am. You begin to say, this is a pattern I have been running. That shift is subtle, but powerful. Because once something is seen as a pattern, it can be changed. Now, reprogramming moves deeper. You are not just changing thoughts. You are reshaping identity. So you begin to introduce new beliefs. Carefully. Intentionally. Not as statements you force, but as perspectives you explore. What if I am capable of more than I have believed? What if my past does not define my future? What if I can respond differently, even in familiar situations? These thoughts feel different. They do not come with certainty. But they come with possibility. And possibility is where change begins. You start to act from these new beliefs. In small ways. You take a step, even when hesitation appears. You speak, even when doubt is present. You move forward, even when the outcome is uncertain. Each action sends a new signal to your mind. A signal that says, "This is also who I can be." And with repetition, this new version of you begins to strengthen. Not instantly, but consistently. The old identity does not disappear. It still appears in familiar moments. It still offers the same thoughts. But now, you see it. And because you see it, you are no longer controlled by it in the same way. You begin to choose differently. Sometimes you follow the old pattern. And that is okay. Because now, you are aware of it. And awareness changes the experience. Other times, you pause. You notice the pattern. And you choose a different response. These moments matter. Because they create a new direction. You are not trying to eliminate the past. You are creating something beyond it. And slowly, the internal conflict begins to shift. It becomes less of a struggle. And more of a transition. The deeper version of you becomes more familiar. More accessible. It begins to guide your thoughts. Shape your responses. Influence your decisions. And the conditioned identity loses its automatic control. Not through force, but through awareness and repetition. This is the beginning of alignment. Where your thoughts, actions, and inner truth begin to move together. And as this alignment grows, you feel a sense of stability. Not because everything is certain, but because you are. You begin to trust your choices. Not blindly, but consciously. You are no longer reacting to your identity. You are shaping it. And this changes everything. Because once you realize that identity is not fixed, you begin to approach your mind differently. Not as something that controls you, but as something you can train. You become more intentional with your thoughts. More aware of your patterns. More focused on the direction you are moving. And with this intention, the new version of you continues to strengthen. Not loudly, but steadily. Your mind runs on loops, endless, repetitive cycles. You think the same thoughts, feel the same emotions. It feels familiar, almost safe. But awareness interrupts repetition. And in that interruption, something powerful begins. Your mind does not move in straight lines. It moves in circles. Quiet, repetitive, almost invisible circles that repeat themselves day after day. Thought after thought. Feeling after feeling. At first, it seems like you are thinking freely. Like each idea is new. Each reaction is natural. Each emotion is a response to the moment. But if you slow down, just enough to observe, you begin to notice something deeper. You have been here before. The same worry. The same doubt. The same internal conversation that seems to restart without invitation. It feels like movement. But it is repetition. These loops are subtle. They do not announce themselves. They begin quietly, with a single thought. A small concern. A quick assumption. A familiar question that appears without effort. And then, the loop begins. One thought leads to another. That might not work. Which becomes, I've failed before. Which becomes, I should be careful. Which becomes hesitation. And before you realize it, you are no longer choosing your thoughts. You are following them. This is the nature of automatic thinking. It does not ask for permission. It runs. And the more it runs, the more familiar it becomes. Familiarity creates comfort. Even when the pattern is limiting. Even when it keeps you in the same place. Because your mind prefers what it knows over what it does not understand. So the loop continues. Not because it is helpful, but because it is known. You feel it in your daily life. Moments where you want to act, but pause. Moments where you feel motivated, but lose momentum. Moments where clarity appears, but fades into confusion. It feels like inconsistency. But it is actually continuity. The same loop. Replaying itself. And within this loop, your identity is reinforced. You begin to believe. This is just how I think. This is just how I react. This is just how I am. But now, something is changing. You are no longer fully inside the loop. You are beginning to see it. At first, only briefly. A moment where you catch a thought before it continues. A second where you notice a familiar emotional pattern. A pause where you realize this has happened before. These moments are small. But they are powerful. Because awareness interrupts repetition. Not by force. Not by stopping the mind completely. But by creating a gap. And in that gap, the loop weakens. You begin to notice the starting point. The first thought. The subtle trigger that begins the cycle. It might be a feeling of uncertainty. A quick comparison. A memory that appears without warning. And now, instead of continuing automatically, you pause. That pause is everything. Because the loop depends on momentum. It needs continuation. It needs one thought to lead into another, without interruption. But when you pause, you break that momentum. At first, it feels unnatural. Your mind is used to speed. To immediate progression. To following the same path without question. But now, you are introducing awareness. You are no longer running the loop unconsciously. You are observing it consciously. And as you observe, you begin to see its structure. You see how it starts. How it builds. How it ends. You see how it always leads to the same emotional state. The same hesitation. The same doubt. The same outcome. And once you see the pattern clearly, you realize something important. The loop is not you. It is something your mind has learned to do. A process. A habit. A sequence that has been repeated enough times to feel natural. But what is learned can be changed. This is where reprogramming becomes precise. You are not trying to eliminate thinking. You are interrupting the pattern. So when the first thought appears, you do something different. You acknowledge it. Without judgment. Without reaction. You simply notice. This is the beginning of the loop. That recognition creates distance. And in that distance, you gain control. Now, instead of continuing the old sequence, you introduce a new direction. Not by forcing positivity. Not by denying the thought. But by redirecting it. When the mind says, this might fail, you respond, this is only one possibility. When the pattern suggests hesitation, you introduce movement. Even a small step. Because action interrupts thought. And each time you do this, you weaken the loop. Not instantly, but consistently. The loop begins to lose its automatic strength. It still appears, but it no longer controls the outcome. You begin to feel the shift. Moments where you would have repeated the pattern. But instead, you pause. Moments where you would have followed the thought. But instead, you observe it. These are the moments where change is happening. Not outside, but within. Your identity begins to shift. You are no longer someone who is caught in cycles. You are someone who sees them. And that awareness changes your relationship with your mind. You begin to trust your ability to choose. Not perfectly, but intentionally. And with that trust, a new pattern begins to form. One based on presence, on observation, on conscious direction. This new pattern is slower, more deliberate. It does not rush. It does not react automatically. It waits. And in that waiting, you find clarity. Now, integration becomes simple. You begin to practice awareness in small moments. When a thought appears, you notice it. When a feeling arises, you observe it. When a reaction begins, you pause. You do not need to change everything at once. You only need to interrupt the loop. Again, and again, and again. And each interruption creates space. Space for new thoughts. Space for new responses. Space for a new version of you to emerge. This is not about controlling every thought. It is about changing the pattern of continuation. Because once the loop is broken, the mind becomes open. And in that openness, something new can begin. You start to experience moments of stillness. Moments where the mind is not repeating, but simply present. These moments may be brief, but they are real. And they show you something important. You are not defined by your loops. You are the one who can step outside of them. And as this realization deepens, you begin to feel a quiet sense of control. Not over everything, but over your direction. And that is where true change begins. A subtle shift begins to take place. You start observing instead of reacting. Thoughts pass through you, but they are not you. This separation creates space. And in that space, you begin to reclaim control. There comes a moment, quiet, almost unnoticeable, when something within you shifts. Nothing outside changes. Your surroundings remain the same. Your responsibilities, your environment, your routine, all continue as they were. But inside, something feels different. You are still thinking, but you are no longer lost in every thought. You are still feeling, but you are not being pulled in every direction. There is space now. And in that space, awareness begins to deepen. For a long time, you believed that your thoughts were you. Every idea that appeared, you accepted. Every fear that surfaced, you felt. Every doubt that formed, you carried. There was no separation. Thought appeared, and identity followed. If your mind said, "I am not enough," you felt not enough. If your thoughts repeated uncertainty, you became uncertain. If fear entered, you became fear. This is how deeply identification works. You do not just hear your thoughts. You become them. But now, something is changing. You begin to notice a gap. A thought appears. And instead of immediately believing it, you observe it. It is subtle, but powerful. The thought is still there. But something else is there too. Something quieter. Something that is watching. This is the beginning of separation. You are no longer completely inside your thoughts. You are aware of them. And this awareness creates distance. Not distance that disconnects you, but distance that frees you. Because when you can see a thought, you are no longer controlled by it in the same way. You begin to notice how thoughts come and go. Some are loud. Some are quiet. Some repeat. Some fade quickly. But none of them stay permanently. They move. Like clouds passing through the sky. And for the first time, you begin to realize, you are not the clouds. You are the sky. The space in which thoughts appear. The presence that observes them. The awareness that remains, even when thoughts change. This realization is not intellectual. It is experiential. You feel it. In moments where a thought arises. But you do not follow it. In moments where emotion appears. But you do not become it. There is a quiet stillness beneath everything. And that stillness is you. This is where your power begins to return. Not by controlling every thought. But by no longer identifying with each one. You begin to see thoughts for what they are. Not truths. Not commands. Not definitions. But events. Temporary, passing, changeable events. And this changes your entire relationship with your mind. You no longer react immediately. You pause. When a thought appears, you notice it. You do not push it away. You do not hold on to it. You simply observe. And in that observation, something remarkable happens. The thought loses intensity. Not because it disappeared, but because you did not attach to it. This is the nature of awareness. It dissolves what it sees, without force. You begin to experience this more often. Moments where you feel calm, even when thoughts are present. Moments where your mind is active, but you remain still. Moments where you are aware, without being overwhelmed. This is not the absence of thinking. It is the presence of consciousness. And as this presence grows, your identity begins to shift. You are no longer someone who is controlled by thoughts. You are someone who observes them. You are no longer reacting automatically. You are responding consciously. And with this shift, comes a new sense of control. Not control through force, but control through awareness. You begin to trust this space within you. This stillness. This quiet presence that does not rush, does not panic, does not react without reason. It becomes your foundation. And from this foundation, you begin to reprogram your mind more effectively. Because now, you are not trying to change thoughts from within them. You are changing your relationship to them. So when a familiar pattern begins, you see it. You do not become it. You watch it unfold. And in that watching, you have a choice. To continue the pattern. Or to let it pass. At first, this choice feels delicate. Almost fragile. Because the old patterns are strong. They have repetition behind them. They have emotional weight. But awareness is stronger. Because it is not based on repetition. It is based on truth. And truth does not need to repeat to exist. So you begin to strengthen this awareness. Not through effort, but through attention. You bring your focus to the present moment. To your breath. To your body. To the space between thoughts. You notice when your mind begins to drift. And gently bring it back. Not with frustration, but with patience. This becomes your practice. Simple. Consistent. Powerful. You are training your awareness. And as you do, the space within you expands. Thoughts still come. But they do not fill everything. There is room now. Room to observe. Room to choose. Room to remain steady, even when the mind is active. This is where transformation deepens. Because now, you are no longer fighting your mind. You are understanding it. You see its patterns. Without being trapped by them. You notice its tendencies. Without being defined by them. And slowly, a new identity begins to form. Not based on thoughts, but based on awareness. You are becoming someone who is present. Someone who is conscious. Someone who is not easily pulled into automatic reactions. This identity feels different. It feels stable. Grounded. Not because nothing changes, but because you remain. And as this awareness continues to grow, you begin to experience something even more profound. Moments where the mind becomes quiet. Not forced. Not empty. But naturally still. In these moments, you feel a deep sense of peace. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer caught in the noise. And from this place, you begin to see clearly. Not through the lens of past patterns, but through direct awareness. This clarity is subtle, but it is real. And it begins to guide you. Not with urgency, but with calm direction. You start to trust it. Because it does not come from fear. It comes from presence. And this presence is always available to you. You do not need to create it. You only need to notice it. Now you see the code behind your reality. Words, patterns, beliefs, all programmable. You begin to choose differently. Gently, intentionally, repeatedly. A new voice is forming within you, and it feels unfamiliar, yet powerful. There is a moment, subtle but undeniable, when you begin to see through your own thinking. Not just the thoughts themselves, but the structure beneath them. The patterns. The repetition. The hidden instructions that have been shaping your reality from behind the scenes. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Your mind is no longer a mystery. It is a system. A system built from words, reinforced through repetition, and expressed through belief. Every thought you have been thinking has been part of a larger pattern. Every reaction you have experienced has followed a sequence. Every limitation you have felt has been supported by an internal script. And now, you are aware of it. Not as something abstract, but as something active. Something that has been running, quietly, consistently, automatically. At first, this realization can feel overwhelming. Because you begin to notice how often the old script appears. How quickly it tries to take control. How naturally it repeats itself. You hear the familiar phrases again. You are not ready. This might not work. You have felt this before. They sound convincing. Because they have been repeated so many times. But now, something is different. You do not accept them immediately. You notice them. And that simple shift changes everything. Because awareness has shown you the code. And once you see the code, you can begin to change it. Not by force. Not by rejecting every old thought. But by introducing something new. A new line. A new interpretation. A new possibility. This is where reprogramming becomes real. You are no longer trying to escape your mind. You are working with it. You begin to understand that thoughts are not fixed. They are flexible. They can be repeated. They can be replaced. They can be rewritten. And just like any system, what you input determines what you experience. So you begin to choose your input. Carefully. Intentionally. When the old script begins, you pause. Not to fight it, but to redirect it. When the mind says, this is too difficult, you introduce, this is something I can learn. When doubt appears, you respond with possibility. Not with certainty, but with openness. Because your goal is not to convince yourself instantly. Your goal is to create a new direction. And direction is created through repetition. So you begin to repeat new thoughts. Not loudly. Not forcefully. But consistently. At first, they feel unfamiliar. Almost distant. Because they do not have history behind them. They do not have emotional weight. They are new. But that is exactly why they matter. Because every pattern was once new. Every belief was once introduced. Every identity was once formed through repetition. And now, you are doing the same thing. Consciously. You are installing a new script. Line by line. Thought by thought. It does not happen instantly. But it happens steadily. Each time you choose a new thought, you strengthen it. Each time you repeat a new belief, you reinforce it. And slowly, your mind begins to recognize it. The new voice becomes more familiar. At first, it appears quietly. In moments of awareness. In small pauses between thoughts. It speaks differently. It does not rush. It does not react with fear. It does not repeat old limitations. It offers something else. Clarity. Calm. Direction. And as you listen, you begin to trust it. Not because it is loud, but because it is consistent. You notice how it responds to situations differently. Where the old voice saw risk, the new voice sees possibility. Where the old script created hesitation, the new one suggests movement. And with each repetition, this new voice grows stronger. Not by replacing the old one immediately, but by existing alongside it. Two voices. Two possibilities. And now, you have a choice. This is where transformation begins to take shape. You are no longer reacting automatically. You are selecting intentionally. Each thought becomes an opportunity. Not to follow the past, but to create something new. And this creation is subtle. You begin to notice changes in how you respond. Moments where you would have doubted, but now you consider possibility. Moments where you would have hesitated, but now you take a step forward. These moments are small, but they are significant. Because they are evidence. Evidence that the script is changing. And as the script changes, so does your experience. Your internal state begins to shift. Less tension. More clarity. Less automatic reaction. More conscious response. You feel it. Not as a sudden transformation, but as a gradual movement. A movement away from limitation and toward awareness. This is the identity shift. You are no longer someone who is defined by old patterns. You are someone who is shaping new ones. You are no longer following inherited beliefs. You are choosing your own. And this choice becomes your power. Now, integration becomes a practice. You begin to guide your thoughts daily. Not by controlling every idea, but by noticing what you repeat. You pay attention to your inner dialogue. To the words you use. To the tone you carry. To the patterns you reinforce. And when you notice the old script, you do not resist it. You replace it. Gently. Consistently. You choose one thought at a time. One belief at a time. You repeat it. Not once, but many times. Until it begins to feel natural. Until it becomes part of your internal system. This is how reprogramming works. Not through intensity, but through consistency. You are building something new. A new voice. A new pattern. A new identity. And as this process continues, you begin to feel a quiet sense of control. Not over everything, but over your direction. You know that your thoughts are not random. You know that your beliefs are not fixed. You know that your internal dialogue is something you can shape. And with this knowing, you move differently. You think differently. You begin to live from a place of awareness. And as this awareness deepens, the new voice within you becomes clearer. Stronger. More present. It no longer feels unfamiliar. It begins to feel like you. You are no longer fixing yourself, you are redefining yourself. Identity is not fixed, it is constructed. You begin to embody new beliefs, not just think them. Your actions align with a new internal truth. You are becoming someone your past could not predict. There is a quiet realization beginning to settle within you. You were never broken. You were patterned. And for a long time, you believed your patterns were your identity. You thought you needed to fix yourself. To correct what felt wrong. To repair something that seemed incomplete. But now, you are starting to see it differently. You are not here to fix who you are. You are here to redefine who you choose to be. This shift is subtle, but powerful. Because fixing comes from judgment. It assumes something is wrong. But redefining comes from awareness. It recognizes that identity is not permanent. It is constructed. Every thought you repeat. Every belief you accept. Every action you take. Becomes a part of who you experience yourself to be. Identity is not something you discover. It is something you build. And for most of your life, that construction happened unconsciously. Through repetition. Through environment. Through moments that shaped your perception. But now, you are aware. And awareness changes the process. You are no longer building your identity by default. You are building it by design. At first, this may feel unfamiliar. Because the old identity still exists. It still speaks. It still offers its familiar patterns. It reminds you of your past. It tries to pull you back into what feels known. You may feel it in moments of hesitation. A quiet thought that says, "This is not who you are." But now, you see it differently. That voice is not truth. It is memory. A reflection of who you have been. Not a definition of who you must remain. And this is where your power deepens. You begin to choose your identity. Not through imagination alone. But through embodiment. You do not just think new beliefs. You act from them. Because identity is not formed by thought alone. It is formed through repetition of behavior. So you begin to move differently. Even when it feels unfamiliar. Even when the old patterns try to return. You take action that aligns with your new direction. When the old identity suggests hesitation, you choose movement. When it suggests doubt, you choose trust. Not blindly, but intentionally. These choices may feel small, but they are significant. Because each action sends a message to your mind. A message that says, "This is who I am becoming." And with repetition, that message becomes belief. And belief becomes identity. You begin to notice the shift. Not in a dramatic way, but in subtle moments. Moments where your response surprises you. Moments where you act with clarity, instead of confusion. Moments where you remain calm, where you once reacted. These moments are evidence. Evidence that something within you is changing. You are no longer operating from the same internal script. You are creating a new one. And this new script is not forced. It is aligned. It feels different. Less reactive. More intentional. Less driven by fear. More guided by awareness. And as this alignment grows, you begin to feel a deeper sense of stability. Not because everything is certain, but because you are. You trust your direction. Not because you know every outcome, but because you are choosing consciously. This is the beginning of embodiment, where your thoughts, actions, and identity begin to move together. You are no longer thinking one way and acting another. You are becoming consistent. And consistency builds identity. Now, reprogramming moves beyond the mind. It becomes something you live. You wake up with awareness. You move through your day with intention. You notice your thoughts and guide them. But more importantly, you act in alignment with who you are becoming. This is where the transformation deepens. Because identity is not changed by thinking differently once. It is changed by living differently, repeatedly. And you are doing that. Step by step. Choice by choice. You are no longer waiting to feel ready. You are becoming ready through action. You are no longer asking, "Can I do this?" You are showing yourself that you can. And with each action, the new identity strengthens. It becomes more natural. More familiar. The old patterns begin to fade. Not completely, but gradually. They lose their intensity. Their control weakens. Because they are no longer being reinforced. You are no longer feeding them. Instead, you are feeding something new. A new belief system. A new internal dialogue. A new way of being. And your mind is adapting. It is recognizing the new patterns. The new responses. The new identity. And it begins to support it. This is the shift. Where the mind no longer resists change, but aligns with it. You begin to feel a quiet confidence. Not loud. Not forced. But steady. It does not come from external validation. It comes from internal consistency. You know who you are becoming. And that knowing changes how you move. You make decisions differently. You respond with clarity. You trust your direction. This is not the end of the process. But it is a powerful stage. Because now, you are no longer trying to change. You are becoming. And becoming is continuous. There is always another level. Another layer. Another expansion of who you can be. But now, you are moving forward consciously. You are not waiting for change to happen. You are creating it. And as you continue, you begin to notice something even deeper. Your emotions begin to stabilize. Your reactions become more balanced. Your internal state becomes more consistent. Not because life is easier, but because you are different. You are no longer defined by your past patterns. You are guided by your present awareness. And this awareness continues to shape your identity. Moment by moment. Choice by choice. Until the new version of you is no longer something you are building. It is something you are living. Your emotions no longer control you, they inform you. You feel deeply, but you remain centered. Triggers lose their power as awareness strengthens. Calm becomes your default state. You are no longer reacting, you are choosing. There was a time when your emotions felt like waves you could not escape. They would rise suddenly. Without warning. Without permission. And once they appeared, they carried you. A single thought could become a feeling. A feeling could become a reaction. And before you realized it, you were inside the experience. Not observing it. Not guiding it. But becoming it. Anger would take your voice. Fear would take your direction. Doubt would take your confidence. It felt automatic. Uncontrollable. And so, you learned to live around your emotions. To avoid certain situations. To protect yourself from triggers. To manage your reactions as best as you could. But no matter how careful you were, they still appeared. Because emotions were never the problem. They were signals. But without awareness, signals feel like commands. And this is where your struggle existed. Not in feeling, but in being controlled by what you felt. You tried to suppress certain emotions. To push them away. To replace them with something more acceptable. But suppression does not create control. It creates tension. Because what is not understood does not disappear. It waits. And then it returns, often stronger. But now, something is different. You are no longer reacting in the same way. A feeling appears. And instead of being pulled into it, you notice it. This is the shift. You feel, but you do not lose yourself in the feeling. There is space. A quiet space between the emotion and your response. And in that space, you remain centered. At first, this may feel unfamiliar, because you are used to immediate reaction. But now, you are introducing awareness. And awareness changes everything. You begin to see emotions differently. Not as problems to fix, but as information to understand. Each emotion carries a message. Fear points to uncertainty. Anger reveals resistance. Doubt highlights belief. And instead of reacting, you begin to listen. When fear appears, you ask, "What is this showing me?" When tension rises, you pause. What thought is creating this? You are no longer fighting your emotions. You are learning from them. And as you do, their intensity begins to change. Not because they disappear, but because you are not feeding them automatically. You are not adding more thoughts to the feeling. You are not continuing the pattern. You are observing. And observation softens reaction. You begin to notice how quickly emotions shift when you do not resist them. They rise. They exist. And then they pass. Like waves. And for the first time, you are not drowning in them. You are watching them. This creates stability. Not by removing emotion, but by changing your relationship with it. You begin to trust your ability to remain steady, even when emotions are present. This is emotional mastery. Not control through suppression, but control through awareness. You feel deeply, but you are not defined by what you feel. And as this awareness grows, triggers begin to lose their power. Situations that once created strong reactions now feel different. Not because they have changed, but because you have. You notice the moment a trigger appears. A thought. A memory. A familiar emotional shift. And instead of reacting immediately, you pause. That pause changes everything. Because triggers rely on speed. They need automatic reaction. But when you slow down, you interrupt the process. You see the pattern before it takes control. And in that moment, you have a choice. To react as you always have. Or to respond differently. At first, this choice feels small. But it is powerful. Because each time you choose awareness, you weaken the old pattern. And over time, the pattern loses its strength. The trigger is still there, but it no longer controls your response. You remain centered. This center becomes your new baseline. A calm, steady presence that exists beneath all emotions. You begin to return to it more quickly, more naturally. Even when something unexpected happens, you feel it. But you do not lose yourself. This is the transformation. You are no longer reactive. You are responsive. And this changes how you experience everything. You begin to move through life with more clarity. Less emotional noise. More internal balance. You are not avoiding emotion. You are understanding it. And understanding creates stability. Now, integration becomes simple. You begin to practice awareness with your emotions. When a feeling arises, you pause. You observe the sensation in your body. Where is it? How does it feel? What thought is connected to it? You do not rush to change it. You allow it to exist. And in that allowing, It begins to shift. You breathe slowly. You remain present. You remind yourself. This is a feeling, not a command. This simple awareness creates space. And in that space, you remain in control. You begin to trust this process. Not because it eliminates emotion, but because it gives you stability within it. And as this stability grows, calm becomes more familiar. Not as something you chase, but as something you return to. Again and again. It becomes your default. Not because nothing disturbs you, but because you know how to respond. And this response is not forced. It is natural. Because you have trained your awareness. You have changed your relationship with your mind. With your thoughts. With your emotions. And now, everything feels different. More clear. More stable. More aligned. You are no longer controlled by internal reactions. You are guided by conscious awareness. And that changes everything. Control is not force, it is consistency. You train your mind the way others train their body. Every thought becomes intentional. Every response becomes aligned. This is where discipline transforms into freedom. There is a misunderstanding most people carry without realizing it. They believe control means force. Force over thoughts. Force over emotions. Force over reactions. But real control never feels like force. It feels like awareness repeated enough times to become natural. You are beginning to understand something deeper now. That your mind is not something to fight. It is something to train. Just like a body is shaped through repetition. Your mind is shaped through consistent attention. Every thought you allow becomes a pattern. Every reaction you repeat becomes a habit. Every belief you reinforce becomes structure. And structure becomes identity. This is why discipline is not about restriction. It is about direction. Most people try to change everything at once. They attempt to control every thought, every emotion, every response. And they become overwhelmed. Because the mind does not respond well to pressure. It responds to repetition. And now, you are beginning to see that clearly. You are no longer trying to control your mind through force. You are guiding it through awareness. There is a difference. A subtle but powerful difference. Force creates resistance. Awareness creates alignment. And alignment is what you are building. You begin to notice your thoughts more clearly now. Not all at once. But moment by moment. A thought appears. And you pause. Not to suppress it. But to observe it. This pause is your discipline. It may seem small. But it is powerful. Because in that pause, you are no longer automatic. You are conscious. And consciousness interrupts old programming. You begin to see how often your mind runs on default settings. Thoughts that repeat without question. Reactions that happen without awareness. Beliefs that operate in the background of your experience. And now, you are no longer fully inside them. You are observing them. This observation is the beginning of mastery. Not mastery over the mind, but mastery within it. You start to realize something important. Your mind will always produce thoughts. That is its nature. But you do not have to follow every thought it produces. You are not the output. You are the observer of the output. And this realization changes everything. Now, discipline becomes simple. You are not trying to eliminate thinking. You are choosing which thoughts to engage. You begin to filter. Not with judgment, but with awareness. Is this thought aligned with where I am going? Or is it a repetition of where I have been? This question becomes your anchor. And slowly, your mental environment begins to shift. Not because thoughts stop appearing, but because your relationship with them changes. You are no longer carried by every mental wave. You are steady within them. This is where consistency begins to matter. Not occasional awareness, but repeated awareness. Again, and again, and again. Each time you notice a thought without reacting, you strengthen your discipline. Each time you pause before responding, you create space. Each time you choose intention over impulse, you reshape your mind. This is not dramatic change. It is subtle construction. Like building a structure brick by brick, thought by thought, choice by choice. And over time, the structure becomes stable. Now, reprogramming becomes deeper. You begin to introduce intentional thoughts. Not randomly, but consistently. Thoughts that align with who you are becoming, not who you have been. When doubt appears, you do not fight it. You replace it with a calmer interpretation, a wider perspective, a more grounded response. Not to deny reality, but to reshape perception. Because perception determines experience. And now, you are aware of that connection. You begin to train your mind the way an athlete trains their body. Not through intensity, but through repetition. A thought is noticed. A pause is created. A new direction is chosen. Again. And again. And again. This is discipline. Not punishment. Not restriction. But refinement. And as this refinement continues, something shifts within you. You begin to feel less scattered, less reactive, more centered. Your thoughts still appear, but they no longer control your direction. You are guiding them. And this guidance becomes natural over time. You are no longer struggling with your mind. You are working with it. This is the beginning of internal harmony, where thinking and awareness begin to move together. And with this harmony comes clarity. You see situations differently. You respond more calmly. You choose more intentionally. Not because life has changed, but because you have. Now, integration becomes part of daily living. You do not set aside time for awareness. You bring awareness into time. In conversations. In decisions. In reactions. You notice your inner dialogue. You adjust it gently. You redirect it when needed. Not with pressure, but with presence. And over time, this becomes your natural state. Conscious thinking. Intentional responding. Steady awareness. And something deeper begins to emerge. Freedom. Not freedom from thoughts, but freedom within them. You are no longer controlled by mental noise. You are no longer lost in automatic patterns. You are present. And presence is power. Because in presence, you are not reacting from the past. You are responding from awareness. And this is where discipline transforms. From effort into identity. You are no longer practicing awareness. You are becoming awareness in motion. And as this continues, your inner world becomes more stable, more aligned, more clear. Not because thoughts disappear, but because you are no longer defined by them. Something begins to shift within your physical state. Tension softens, energy returns, balance restores. Your body reflects the harmony of your thoughts. Healing is no longer external, it begins within. You are witnessing the connection you once ignored. There are moments when the body speaks in silence. Not through words, but through sensation. A tightness you cannot explain. A fatigue that arrives without effort. A heaviness that seems to exist without cause. And for a long time, you may have believed these were separate from your thoughts. Random. Physical. Unrelated to your inner world. But now, you are beginning to see differently. The body is not separate from the mind. It is an extension of it. Every thought you repeat. Every belief you hold. Every emotional pattern you sustain. Is communicated to your body. Not as language. But as instruction. And over time, those instructions become physical experience. Tension is not just muscle. It is repeated thought made visible. Fatigue is not only lack of rest. It is mental overload expressed physically. Imbalance is not only external. It is internal dialogue reflected outward. And now, you are beginning to understand this connection. Not intellectually, but experientially. You start to notice subtle changes. Moments where your body feels lighter. Moments where breathing becomes easier. Moments where stillness feels natural instead of forced. These moments may be small, but they are significant. Because they show you something important. When your mind shifts, your body responds. Not instantly. Not dramatically. But gradually. Like a system recalibrating itself. At first, you may still feel old sensations. Tension that returns. Familiar tightness. Residual fatigue. But now, you do not interpret them the same way. You no longer see them as permanent. You see them as responses. And responses can change. This awareness creates space. Space between sensation and interpretation. Space between feeling and reaction. Space between the body and the old meaning you gave it. And in that space, something begins to shift. You are no longer reacting to your body in fear. You are observing it with awareness. This changes everything. Because fear intensifies sensation. But awareness softens it. You begin to sit with what you feel, without resistance. Not trying to fix it immediately. Not trying to escape it. Just noticing. And as you do, you begin to experience something subtle. The intensity begins to soften. Not because the sensation disappears. But because you are no longer amplifying it with thought. This is the beginning of internal healing. Not as a sudden event. But as a gradual alignment. Your thoughts begin to shift first. Then your emotional responses. And finally, your physical experience follows. This is the natural order. Mind. Emotion. Body. And now, you are working at the source. You begin to introduce new internal instructions. Not as forced affirmations. But as gentle redirections. When tension appears, you pause. You breathe. And you remind yourself. This is a message, not a threat. When fatigue arises, you soften your inner dialogue. My system is adjusting. I can be present with this. When discomfort is felt, you do not resist it. I allow this sensation to exist without fear. These are not just thoughts. They are signals. Signals of safety. Signals of awareness. Signals of recalibration. And your body responds to them. Slowly. Subtly. But consistently. You begin to notice shifts. A deeper breath without effort. A release in areas that once felt tight. A sense of grounding that was not there before. These are not coincidences. They are communication. Your body is responding to your mind becoming calmer. More aware. More aligned. And as this alignment grows, you begin to realize something profound. Healing was never something external. It was never something you had to chase. It was always a process of inner harmony. When the mind is in conflict, the body reflects conflict. When the mind is calm, the body reflects calm. This is not theory. This is experience. And now, you are living it. You begin to trust your body differently. Not as something separate from you, but as something communicating with you. Every sensation becomes information. Every feeling becomes guidance. Every shift becomes feedback. And instead of reacting, you listen. This listening changes your internal environment. It reduces resistance. It softens tension. It allows flow. And in this flow, balance begins to return. Not as perfection, but as stability. Now, integration becomes part of your awareness. Throughout the day, you check in. Not critically, but gently. How is my body feeling right now? What thoughts are present? Is there tension I am not noticing? And when you notice something, you respond with awareness. Not control. Not force. But presence. You breathe. You relax. You realign your thoughts. And in doing so, you support your system. This is self-regulation. Not mechanical, but conscious. And over time, it becomes natural. Your body begins to feel safer. Because your mind is no longer constantly creating internal pressure. And safety allows restoration. Energy begins to return. Not all at once, but gradually. You feel moments of clarity. Moments of ease. Moments where your body feels like it is not resisting life. These moments expand over time. Because you are no longer unconsciously creating internal tension. You are observing. You are adjusting. You are aligning. And this alignment becomes your new baseline. Not perfect, but balanced. And as this balance stabilizes, something deeper begins to emerge. A quiet trust in your own system. That your body is not working against you. That your mind is not separate from healing. That your awareness is part of restoration. And this trust changes everything. Because when you trust the system, you stop fighting it. And when you stop fighting it, it begins to restore itself. You are no longer who you were at the beginning. Your thoughts are clear, intentional, aligned. You respond with awareness, not habit. The voice inside you now serves you. And for the first time, you are in control. There is a moment in every transformation when you quietly realize you are no longer the same person who began the journey. Not because everything outside has changed, but because everything inside has reorganized itself. Your thoughts are no longer chaotic fragments pulling you in different directions. They have become clearer, slower, more intentional. There is space between stimulus and response now. Space where awareness lives. Space where choice becomes possible. And in that space, you are no longer reacting blindly. You are deciding. For so long, your life may have felt like a series of reactions. A thought appears, and you follow it. An emotion arises, and you become it. A situation unfolds, and you respond automatically. But now, that pattern is dissolving. You notice your thoughts before you become them. You observe your emotions before you merge with them. You pause before you respond. And in that pause, something powerful is happening. You are reclaiming authorship of your inner world. This is not a dramatic shift. It is subtle. Almost unnoticeable at first. But it changes everything. Because now, the voice inside you is no longer chaotic noise. It is becoming guidance. You hear it differently now. Where it once repeated fear, it now offers clarity. Where it once created doubt, it now suggests perspective. Where it once reinforced limitation, it now opens possibility. And you are listening. Not blindly, but consciously. This is the turning point. Because control was never about silencing the mind. It was about training it to align with awareness. And now, alignment is happening. You begin to notice how your responses have changed. Situations that once triggered emotional reactions now feel manageable. Thoughts that once spiraled into worry now pass more gently. Internal pressure that once felt constant now softens. Not because life has become easier, but because your relationship with life has changed. You are no longer inside every thought. You are observing them, guiding them, selecting them. And this changes your identity at its root. You are no longer someone who is controlled by mental patterns. You are someone who is aware of them. And awareness is power. Not the kind of power that forces change, but the kind that allows change to happen naturally. You begin to feel a quiet stability forming within you. Not emotional suppression. Not detachment. But grounded presence. You are here. Fully. Without fragmentation. And from this presence, your decisions become clearer. Your actions become more aligned. Your energy becomes more directed. There is less waste. Less internal conflict. Less confusion. And more flow. This is what integration feels like. Not perfection, but coherence. Now, your inner dialogue becomes something you can work with. When an old thought appears, you do not panic. You recognize it. You observe it. And you gently choose again. Not forcefully, but intentionally. You are no longer arguing with your mind. You are guiding it. And this guidance becomes natural through repetition. Again and again, you choose awareness. Again and again, you choose clarity. Again and again, you return to presence. And with repetition, identity stabilizes. You begin to trust yourself differently. Not because you are always perfect, but because you are conscious. And consciousness is consistent even when emotions are not. You begin to notice how much energy was once lost in unconscious thinking. The overanalysis. The internal arguments. The repetitive loops. Now, that energy returns to you. Not as tension, but as clarity. You feel more centered in your decisions. More grounded in your responses. More aligned in your direction. And this alignment becomes your new normal. You are no longer trying to become someone different. You are living as someone who is aware. And awareness continues to refine everything. Even your body begins to reflect it. More ease in movement. More calm in breath. More stability in presence. Because the body follows the mind. And the mind is now following awareness. This is the natural order restoring itself. You are not forcing transformation. You are allowing alignment. And in that allowance, everything reorganizes. Now, discipline is no longer effort. It is identity. You do not try to be aware. You are aware. You do not try to be present. You return to presence naturally. And this is the completion of integration. Where practice becomes being. Where effort becomes flow. Where awareness becomes your baseline state. And yet, you remain open. Because this is not the end. It is a continuation. A deeper refinement. A quieter mastery. A more subtle expansion. You understand now that control was never about dominance over the mind. It was about partnership with it. And that partnership is now established. You and your mind are no longer separate forces. You are aligned systems. Working together. Moving together. Evolving together. And from this alignment, life feels different. Not externally perfect, but internally coherent. There is less resistance. Less fragmentation. More clarity in movement. And in this clarity, you begin to sense something even deeper. A quiet awareness that this state is not fragile. It is stable. Because it is built on understanding, not force. On awareness, not suppression. On consistency, not intensity. And that makes it sustainable. Now, as you move forward, you do so differently. With presence in your thoughts. With awareness in your emotions. With intention in your actions. And this becomes your natural rhythm. A rhythm of conscious living. Where nothing is automatic anymore. Everything is observed. Everything is chosen. Everything is aligned. And as this state deepens, you begin to realize something profound. You were never trying to become someone new. You are always returning to who you truly are beneath the conditioning.